What's going on YouTube? Listen up, young elder gang. This is Dr. Omar at you with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video, fam. I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes. In this video, you will find history, definitions, scripture, information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning, the truth. Keep in mind, this content used in this video is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth as we best understand it today. Be sure to hit that like button, young elder gang. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Hit that bell, and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. All right, let's get started. You also have the Shuyuk, or Dunaakial, who originally left the planet Risk and took residence in Shambhala, but eventually had to set up their own cavern. The chief of the Dunaakial, called Rabboni Fukur, the Negroid seed, or Moor, married a Sunainan Tero, the Mongoloid seed, a brown seed chieftain's daughter named Lucinus against her will, just to establish peace in the caverns. For the Dunaakial were being attacked by the Samin Dero, who the Sinin Tero were supposed to keep under control, because they were violent, destructive, and aggressive beings. So, to bring about a peaceful coexistence, the chief of the Teros, whose name was Lamsa, gave his daughter to Fukur, the chief of the Dunaakial. Fukur gave his daughter, Radia, to Lamsa, chief of the Teros, to marry his oldest son named Hatif. Lucinus bore Fukur no children. She, by shadow hour, left the caverns and went to the surface and sought out Fukur's brother Ishaq, who lived in the best part of the planet, in the enclosed garden in Saudi Arabia in Mecca. She was welcomed by Ishaq, who hated his twin brother Fukur, who took his wife Lucinus as his own. Fukur and Ishaq had 5 other brothers, namely Amo, Hasi, Rama, Aksad, and Tunde. All save the first 2 stayed within the caverns. Amo, who was also a runaway, lived 20 miles outside of the enclosed garden at the site where the bodies of Cadmon and Eve are buried, called Mount Arafat. There was originally a village within which an illegitimate birth between Ishaq and his brother Fukur's wife Lucinus occurred. Lucinus was mad at her father Lamsa for giving her away, for she always longed to marry a Tero such as herself. So, she, out of anger, had a child by Ishaq, the disagreeable yet reformed brother of Fukur, so her child would be of no service to her tribe. They gave birth to an unsightly being, with the head the size of 2 men, by no fault of his own. As a child, he was the object of much attention because he had the head the size of 2 men, and when he grew up, many referred to him as the big head scientist. Yakub, as he was called, wanted to get revenge on his people for their scorn and their mockery. This was an opportune time for disagreeable Pleiadians from Pleiades, a star cluster in the Taurus constellation, to tap into his brains and inspire an unsightly thing. He was led to have faith that he could create a race of people that would rule over his own people and then the whole planet. The people around him that got air of his diabolical plan would ask him, "Will these people be wicked and warlike?" He simply answered, "Only I know that answer, you do not." He knew that he would be their God. He got his idea 8,400 years ago. The process would take 600 years, which would take him to the year 7,800. Yet the cursed seed of Canaan would manifest 6,600 years ago, according to their story, or his story. This God, Yaaquub, created his own Adam in his image, after his likeness. In the image of a human being wicked and weak-minded that was overcome with jealousies and envies, he was born with an inferiority complex and to subject the world to their wish of superiority. A new man, a kind of man, simply mankind. Yaaquub owed his peculiar appearance to the fact that he was mixed. For Teros were hydrocephalic and Ishaq was a Dunaakial who also had large craniums. But his wife, named Lucinus, was herself disagreeable from the tribe of agreeable Teros, who had a dome-shaped skull. This combination produced the unsightly Yaaquub. The Teros lived in an adjacent cavern to the Dunaakials. The Tero Lucinus refused to stay amongst the Dunaakials, for she was always teased about her cone-shaped head. Thus, she came to the surface to seek out the surface Dunaakial. This surface-dwelling Dunaakial, who was brother of her husband Ishaq, was abstract-looking amongst surface dwellers, for his cranium was extremely large. This mixture gave birth to Yaaquub. Yet they were the wisest of the wise in that land. They referred to them simply as the aliens because of their contact with the Pleiadians. Not only did her son have a head the size of 2 men, but 2 brains, both activated by visitors from Aldebaran, a double star in the Taurus constellation, and Pleiades, a cluster of stars in the Taurus constellation. His name was called Yaaquub, who was also known as Yahakobi, son of Ishaq. He is also known as Yakub, as well as Yaaquub, Yaaquub, or Bar Yishaq. His mother's name was Lucinus, the Taro of the original tribe of Lunarians who came to this planet to dwell beneath the surface. The Lunarians occupied Kingu before the Hindu or the Maldekians came there. She was not in agreement with a Taro marrying a Dunaakial for political reasons. Rebelling, being weak and wicked, her trials and tribulations led to her desire to destroy men. Unknowing to her that this was prophesied by the wise 24 scientist called Magus, the Magi, who by the stars, who predicted his birth 15,000 years ago and charted this birth to be 8,400 years when he was actually born. So he was born in the house in the land of his uncle Ammo, 20 miles outside of Becca, and later to return there at age 5, with a determined idea to bring about a new people and to teach them to rule for 6,000 years. This creation was not to be perfected or completed until his people reached the place called Pelion, a peak 1,601.9 m, 5,252 feet high of northeast Greece in the mountain region of eastern Thessaly. His beast-like people took refuge in the caves of these mountains, ruled by an Enkiduit called Chiron, son of Cronus, and his wife Philyra. Cronus was born a centaur because Cronus had his genes spliced with a horse. Cronus did this in order to deceive his original wife Rhea, also called Raya. Chiron and Artemis were educated by Apollo himself, and together they were the masters of medicine. Apollo was the son of Zeus and Leto, called the deity of light. The sun, alchemy, and medicine, who coined the phrase, "Know thyself," a phrase used by his followers throughout time. This is their story as recorded by Mormon. Long ago, a spirit child was born named Taaghuwt to a well-known race of blonde-haired, blue-eyed beings. His parents were Jinn and Jinnat. Later, he was to be reborn or reincarnated to physical parents. Through obedience, death, and resurrection, the spirit child elevated to be amongst the deities. They believed this one, Taaghuwt, to be their Lord, a heavenly father, calling him Aluhum, El-Naur, and Kanas, who lived near a star called Kuluub in the Pleiades constellation, near to their lords and masters. Taaghuwt became the prince of cherubs, and he had billions of spirit children called jinns that were born, giving him the title Jan, ruler of the jinns. So Aluhum, as the heads of the deities, called a great council meeting to decide the destiny of these disagreeable spirit children. Both of the Aluhum's elder sons were there, Diablos and his brother Ziusus. A plan was presented to them to go to Tiamat and rebuild there, and then to send these spirit children to live and take on mortal bodies and learn agreeableness from disagreeableness in hopes to alter their nature for the best. Diablos stood up and put his bid in as savior of the new world, wanting all the glory for himself, forcing all to become deities under him. Thus, he became known as Abalas. Opposing this idea, Ziusus said, "Why not give them freedom of choice as other beings?" The vote that followed was in favor of Ziusus. This enraged Diablos, who convinced a great many of the spirits destined to go to Tiamat the earth to revolt. Thus Diablos became the devil, and his followers became demons. Those who stayed neutral in decision were cursed with black skin. This is your dark-skinned, straight-haired Hindu, also called Dravidians. Those spirit children destined to be banished from their own star constellation of Kulub, also Keleb, fought on behalf of them not wanting to be exiled to the planet Earth. They would in time be grafted and would become pale-skinned and be born to human parents. One of the Dravidians and his wife came down to Earth as their Adam and Eve to start their race. Then thousands of years after that, a Dravidian named Krunus came in human form to Earth from the starbase Kulub to have sex with the virgin Rhea to provide Ziusus with a physical body. After Ziusus came to adulthood, he took 3 wives, Maya, Metis, and Mnemosyne, and fathered a number of children. Amongst them were Apoleia, father of Hamartia, from which many pale-skinned earthlings claim to be a direct descent before his crucifixion. Many think him to be Yeshua bar Dawid, Hamashiach, Yeshua ibn Dawud el-Masu. After Ziusus resurrected, he appeared in the land of frogs to the Navajo, who are of the original Yisraeli or Yacobites. By 421 AD, the dark-skinned Navajo tribe, called also Lamanites, who are of the original Hopi tribe, had come to this land 16,000 years ago. The name Hopi comes from the word Hopitu Shinumu, meaning peaceful people. The Hopis first settled in Oribe, Arizona, America. They descended from Hapi, the 4th son of Har, high up on the mountain, the ancient name for Horus of Egypt. whose symbol was the falcon, and each of his sons symbolize a falcon as well, which resulted in the Hopi tradition of the Kachina doll, which is a symbol of the spirit embodying the power of the divine eagle spirit called Kwahu. His other sons were Imset, Kebesenuf, Duamutef, and the last was Hapi. They protected the dead. Horus was the son of Osiris and Isis, not to be mistaken with another Horus, who was the brother of Set and the son of Amun-Ra, the grandfather of Osiris. They were guided to this sacred place by way of a flying craft, saucer, that was piloted by Kachina, the deity of the Hopi. The deity Masau placed in the hands of the Hopi a set of stone tablets called Tiponi, a symbol of power and authority. The Hopis are direct descendants of more ancient Anasazi, who claim their origin from the Star People. The word Anasazi is from a Navajo word meaning the ancient ones. The Anasazi built the numerous communal dwellings or pueblos, many now in ruins on the high plateau of the southwestern United States. Hopi Prophecies contain stories of the inner earth city called Palatquapi, which have secret openings or passageways leading inward and downward to the inner earth, which are located throughout the Grand Canyon area in northwest Arizona, America. They say that the beings that built the inner earth city came from Pleiades. The Hopis also claim that the inhabitants who live in this city are humanoid-type beings, some 7 feet tall, with blonde hair and blue eyes, who have small holes in the middle of their foreheads containing the third eye, and was the symbol of their telepathic power. These inhabitants that they are referring to are the Flugelrods. Palatquapi was the name of the Flugelrods cavern, which has an entrance in the Thessaly Mountains, a region of east-central Greece between the Pindus Mountains and the Aegean Sea as well. Their history can be traced to Pleiades, often called Seven Sisters. The Hopi have named them Chuhokan, meaning those that cling together. They claim their descendancy had a direct connection with these Pleiadians. They had defeated all the spirit children who were pale-skinned Nephilians called Nephites in a great battle. The battle was recorded on gold plates in cuneiform. Joseph Smith said he had stumbled upon them in his own backyard in the New Babylon in America, Moroni or Moroni, the last Nephilian, who buried them in hills of Kamurat. 1,400 years lasted a descendant of Moroni, son of Mormon, named Joseph Fielding Smith Jr., who was known for his lies and storytelling, who tells of his ancestry, his family members, and their early abodes. He tells of an unusual excitement about religion and how it is to prevail in the Western world, namely New York. He determines to seek wisdom as directed by James, claiming the father and son appeared, and Joseph is then called to his prophetic ministry, being Baum in Vermont, America. He calls himself Prophet of the Mormons, a German word meaning bugbear, a specter, a hobgoblin, a ghoul, a gargoyle, a spirit, a spook, an ogre. Wherefore it was an abridgment of the record of the people of Nephi, and also of the Lamanites, written to the Lamanites, who are a remnant of the house of Israel, and also to Jew and Gentile, written by the way of commandment, and also by the spirit of prophecy and of revelation, written and sealed up that and hid up unto the Lord, that they might not be destroyed, to come forth by the gift and power of God, unto the interpretation thereof by the gift of God. He was raised to the height of prophethood, because he claimed to have had visions that instructed him to organize an assembly, because all Ziususite creeds are an abomination, and they disregard the original rules and regulations and of their original purpose, which was the conquering and ruling over the planet, and the spawning new families throughout. Greece became the home of these spirit children who had manifested in the flesh and were indeed goblins. Greece was their home base. The seed of Yakub was to seek them out for unknown reasons. The hidden meaning was in the real name, Patmos, the place of my own killing, that is Patmos, in the Aegean Sea. That is Greece, where this mad scientist Yakub was to create a new race to destroy his own people and himself. Yet he died at age 150 and never saw the completion of his creation. They were all to be healthy, strong, and good breeders. This new god, Yakub, made the Flugelrods by genetic splicing called grafting. They were called Jews, or Jews, to show forth his power and his wisdom, declaring himself the righteous, and he made a people genetically and mentally weak to give them the power to rule. Then he intended to eliminate them to show and prove that he is God, always was and always will be. So his mother left Shambhala during the shadow hours. She surfaced and sought out the home of Fukur's brother Yishaq, who lived in Baka. This is where the story of Plato of the 7 men in the cave comes from. These are the 7 brothers, namely, Fukur, Yishaq, Amo, Hasi, Rahma, Aksad, and Tunde. Let me show in a figure how far our nature is enlightened or unenlightened. Behold human beings living in the underground cave, which has a mouth open towards the light. Here they have been from their childhood and are chained, so they can only see what is in front of them. Behind them, a fire is blazing, and they are not allowed to turn their heads. So, like ourselves, they see only their own shadows, the shadows of one another, or of objects they possess, which the fire throws on the opposite wall of the cave. Further, this prison has an echo which is heard from people on the outside. The prisoners within have always fancied when one of the passers-by passing shadow. To them, the truth is literally nothing but shadows. Of true images, they know nothing. Look again now. You see what will naturally follow if the prisoners are set free and come to realize their error. At first, when one of them is liberated and suddenly compelled to turn his head and look towards the light, he will suffer sharp pains. The glare will distress him. He was unable to see the realities of which, in his former state of illusion, he saw only the shadows. He will at first fancy that the shadows that he formerly saw are truer than the real objects which are now revealed to him. He will be required to grow accustomed to the sight of the upper world. At first he will see the shadows best. Last of all, he will be able to see the sun in its own proper place, and not merely its reflections. He will then overstand that the things which he and his fellows have been accustomed to behold. When he remembers his old habitation and the wisdom of the cave and of his fellow prisoners, he will pity them. And if the inhabitants of the cave have been in the habit of conferring honors among themselves, he will no longer care for such honors or envy the possessors of them. He will endure anything rather than think as they do, and or live after their manner. And if such a one were suddenly to come back out of the sun and place himself again in his old situation, he would be certain to have his eyes full of darkness. It would be very bad for him if there were a contest, and he had to compete in measuring the shadows with the prisoners who had never moved out of the cave. In such an instant, the men of the cave would say of him, "He went up and down, he came without his eyes." They will maintain that it is better not even to think of ascending. Hence, if anyone tried to loose another prisoner from the cave and lead him up to the light, let them only catch the offender, and they would put him to death. And Yishaq was put to death for that very reason, for violating the sacred oath of the Dunaakial by marrying Fukur, his brother's wife. This further outraged the already deranged Yaaquub. Lucinus, mother of Yaaquub, was dissatisfied with the tranquility of Shambhala. Living under Dunaakial rules and regulations, she found the home of Yishaq, who took her in, and they birthed an illegitimate child. His mother, Lucinus, overcome by grief at the remembrance of her home Shambhala, died an untimely death. And the following year, Yishaq was killed, leaving the 5-year-old Yaaquub parentless. Yaaquub started school at the age of 4. By age 6, Yaaquub was living with his uncle Amo, the brother of his father Yishaq, who himself, many years before, was cast from Shambhala for disagreeable activity. Thus, he also took residence on the surface of the earth. Yaaquub was living with Amo in his home 20 miles outside of Becca. He was fascinated by magnetism. This further affected the mental state of this now young man, living in the area where the original Garden of Eden was, yet 20 miles outside of the original site of the enclosed Garden of Delight, in a village in a mountain region called Arafat. The foundation of the Garden of Delight was built by Arazu, and Ashnan was responsible for the grain and the sustenance of the garden, and this enclosed Garden of Delight was to be the best part of the planet Earth. It was ruled by one of the 120 Akashtarfan appointed by Koresh, who ruled from the seat of Midas in Chaldea, land of the demons. At the age of 18, Yaaquub had already finished all of the schools of learning in his day and time. This is where Yaaquub was to convert the people needed for the breeding of his new race. In the task of making a disagreeable, wicked, and physically weak being with the ability to rule with a special kind of reverse knowledge, Yaaquub had a verbal fight with the Elohim of the holy city, who opposed him about deserting his people and going off to make a new people that would be weak and wicked, that use their evil nature to try and conquer the righteous. They would be called the devil, and their lifespan to rule would be 6,000 years, which they would have lived as a new nation. Then reverse lived and you get devil, and live in reverse is evil. Why reverse? Because his nation was born with dyslexia and they wrote from left to right. as opposed to the original right to left. Long before Yaaquub was allowed to begin his undertaking, the word spread of his plan. One of the Elohim stepped forward of the righteous nation named Malach, whose job was to try to convince him not to undertake this evil act. It resulted in a physical fight against Yaaquub that lasted from 6 p.m. during the shadow hours straight on past 12:01 a.m. the next day. Thus, it is said that they fought up until the next day. Yaaquub had his right leg disjointed. Yaaquub inquired of this Elohim, who was a mortal man in physical form, at the end of the fight, "What is your name?" only to be told, "It is not written for you to know my name." This fight took place in Peniel, located on the north bank of the Jabbok close to the Jordan, for Yaaquub came face to face with an El. From that day on, Yaaquub was crippled, walking with a limp, carrying a cane. This man opposed the fact that Yaaquub left the camp during the shadow hours, and he was trying to cross the lake of Jabbok, a stream which intersects the mountain range of Gilead and falls into the Jordan on the east about midway between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, with his assistance of doctors, nurses, and cremators, which by shadow hours they deserted all the rest of his family. And this Malach declared that he would break both his legs before he let him pursue this undertaking, in the making of this new breed of people from his own genes being an original Negroid and brown Mongoloid germ. The Negroid black germ from his blood, the blood of the Dunaakial, and the Mongoloid brown germ from his blood, the blood of the Taro, who had mixed with Pleiadians long ago. The conflict broke out and the fight ensued, and when Yaaquub's leg was dislocated, he held onto Malach as the wicked troops of Iisakhar was coming over the horizon. Malach said, "Let me go, and you will have the blessing of the god of the Babylonian Ishtar, the god of the Egyptians Ra, and the god of the Sumerians El. You will have their blessings, just don't pursue your undertakings. You shall be called Ishtar, Ra = Amon-Ra, and El-Elu." That represented the three most powerful gods on the planet at the time, Isis, Ra, and El. Thus he became known as Israel, touched by the hand of an Elohim, you say Yisrael. Yaaquub agreed yet deceived him, saying to all that he had got the blessings which had given him consent to continue across the stream of Jabbok and to continue in his undertaking on his journey to Pelion, a peak 1,601.9 m, 5,252 feet, high, of northeast Greece in eastern Thessaly, in the Isles of Patmos, an island of southeast Greece in the Dodecanese Islands in the Aegean Seas, where he was going to create his people and make them weak and wicked, and give them the power to rule for 6,000 years. Yaaquub was captured. As Yaaquub made converts in and around the holy city of Becca, persecution set in. The authorities became afraid of such powerful teachings with promises of luxury and making slaves of others. As they began making arrest of those who believed the teachings, the officers would go back and find, and to their surprise, others were still teaching and believing it. Finally, they arrested Yaaquub. However, it only increased the teachings. They kept persecuting and arresting Yaaquub's followers until they filled all the jails called a prison or Sham'oon beneath the desert sands. The 120 appointed Akashtarfan officers finally reported to the new ruler, named Koresh, that there was no room for the prisoners. They had no more room for Yaaquub's converted followers, who were enraged for his abuse. They dragged Yaaquub from his cell to the middle of the city. There they built a stone pillar in the center of the town and called it the seat of Satan, called Al-Ula, where they tied Yaaquub and asked the people of that city, should he be worshipped, praised, or stoned? They choose to stone him and call him Shaitan. Yaaquub's followers rioted in the prisons. All the jails were filled, and they said, when we go back out into the streets, we found them still teaching. This is what was reported to King Koresh. What shall we do with them? The king questioned the officers on just what his teachings were, and of the name of the leader. They replied, Haggai. When the officers had given the king the answers to everything, the king said, this is not the name of that man. This man is Yaaquub, the Negroid scientist, an alien to our land, a mischief maker in the land. This Shaitan was predicted by our Magus 15,000 years ago. On entering the prison, the king was shown Yaaquub's cell. The walls were lined with sketches and plans of his future experiments. The ruler said, so you are Yaaquub? He said, yes, I am. The king said, Yaaquub, I have come to see if we could work out some agreement that would bring about an end to this trouble. What would you suggest? Yaaquub told the king Koresh. "If you give me and my followers everything to start a civilization as you have, and furnish us with money and other necessities of life for 20 years, I will take my followers, and we will go from you." The king was pleased with the suggestion, and request made by Yaaquub was sent to Mithridath, the money exchanger, and it was agreed to take care of them for 20 years, until Yaaquub's followers were able to go for themselves. After learning who Yaaquub was, believing him to be Shaitan, or the devil himself, they all were afraid of him, and they were glad to make almost any agreement with him and his followers. This is the history or future of Yaaquub and his people, the Asiatic black men and women, black people with 6 ether, straight hair of Hindu descent. Upon his release, Yaaquub was not allowed to preach, yet his head prophet, called Haggai, prepared his followers. But for his master plan, he needed to convert loyal followers that would obey him regardless of who or what. This was executed by the loyal ones. Before this secret project could begin, there must be a great many people converted to his beliefs. He first traveled 20 miles inland from his uncle's house to the holy site, where the tree of knowledge did sit. There he started to preach in the streets of Becca again, making such host of converts that the authorities, increasingly concerned, finally exiled him. He and a small band of his followers, the doctors, the nurses, and the cremators, crossed northward up and over the Jordan, and over to Egypt, which was originally called Ta, meaning land, and also Tamara, meaning land of Ra, where they took ships into the Aegean Sea to await the arrival of his guinea pigs. He died of a brain tumor at age 150 before they arrived. But his scientists were prepared. The scientists, or his wise men, El-Hakumat of his day, said it couldn't be done. He departed, for they planned to kill him and exile his followers. However, those who supported his undertakings prepared the greatest fleet of ships to sail. Haggai, with 59,999 followers, sailed on a journey for a home in Ganawa, there to stay for 50,000 years, or until the new cycle. This journey took him and the prophet Yaaquub's followers completely around the continent. But not before there was a great falling away and dissatisfaction amongst his, Yaaquub's followers. In fact, about 9/10 of them were dissatisfied, for many did not want to leave their homeland. Great ships were prepared at the dock port in Sudan called Sauda, the outer field. The Asiatic black men who were followers of Yaaquub and lived on the best part of the planet Earth were banished for following this alien in disregards of the laws of their own land.